Welcome along to the Ever So Lean podcast. I'm Matt Sims. Each episode, we get a fascinating insight along with some useful hints and tips as I'm joined by some fantastic guests who all have one thing in common, and that's a passion for developing continuous improvement cultures that drive engagement, improve metrics, and reduce costs.
The Ever So Lean podcast with Matt Sims. You know it makes sense.
This episode is sponsored by Catalyst Consulting Limited. Catalyst Consulting exists to help people and organisations work better today and be ready for tomorrow. They have a rich history of igniting business transformation using business agility, lean, Six Sigma, strategy deployment, agile and change management. They can help you and your organisation to develop the skills necessary to work and manage differently. To find out more, check out catalystconsulting.co.uk. Today, we're joined by James Franz, who is the Vice President of Global Operations at the Toyota Way Academy, the birthplace of lean excellence and the Toyota production system. Jim will share with us his fascinating career journey, providing us an insight into how the Toyota Way has evolved and give us the inside scoop into his Shingo-prize-winning book, The Toyota Way to Continuous Improvement, which he co-authored with Dr. Jeffrey Leiker. Jim himself was trained by Toyota in both Japan and the United States, providing him with a diverse learning experience that I think we are all envious of. Jim is the co-founder of the Toyota Way Academy along with Dr. Jeffrey Leiker, and as well as inspiring others through lean leadership over a remarkable career, Jim has applied his knowledge and skills practically within engineering and manufacturing environments to become proficient and recognised as an industry expert where he has earned global accolades. Utilising the Toyota production system principles, Jim has successfully led enterprise-wide transformations that streamline operations, optimise productivity and introduce system efficiencies. This work continues as he is currently working with companies worldwide across multiple industries to develop leadership, product and process improvement to achieve significant improvements in end-line quality, leadership, productivity, lead time and cost reductions. And finally, and certainly not least, Jim's credentials include BS and MS degrees in engineering from the General Motors Institute and the University of Michigan. Jim, welcome to the Ever So Lean podcast. And did I miss anything?
No, not at all. That was quite thorough. I'm looking around to see who it is you're talking about.
You do have quite the history, though, to be honest. It's hard to squeeze it all into a short introduction.
Yeah, for sure. I've been very fortunate. This is going on 37 years in the trenches, so I've certainly had a lot of luck and a lot of opportunities that I've been able to take advantage of.
I think that's where we should probably start, is right back at the beginning, where this all began, because it's fascinating. Tell us about where this all came from.
Let's see. It was late 80s, early 90s. An economic recession had a young engineer looking for employment, and this was at the same time that Toyota was looking to create a North American engineering footprint. So I was hired with 8 or 9 others as this first cohort of production engineering. I was kind of sitting between the designers and the plants. And they hired us and shipped us all off to Japan into different functions in engineering to start learning our trade. So I was over there for a couple years. After those assignments wound down, we repatriated back to the U.S. Was working there, went down to Kentucky to work on launches down there. Eventually left, went to another company. They basically gave me a lot of money. The usual reason for jumping ship. And I was young. And in 99, I met Dr. Jeffrey Leiker, who is a great guy, technically academic, but probably one of the greatest connector minds I've ever met. If he hears something once, he keeps it in place and connects dots. And 4 years later, he connected some mental dots, reached out to me, and I started working with him as a consultant. And he started shipping me all over the planet to start learning my consulting trade. And we've been doing that now for 20 years this year. In 2008, we formed the Toyota Way Academy because we wanted to offer something different in this space. We wanted, I guess, to teach the Toyota Way using the Toyota Way, which is the learn by doing. And You contrast that with a lot of organizations that have massive binders of things and internal teams running around doing things to organizations. And we found that to be incredibly ineffective and actually wasn't really what I learned when I was over there. So it's been a great ride on the consulting. It was great living and working in Japan in that culture, which was all about the work. It was hard work. They didn't call it anything. They just called it work. It took Womack, Jones, and Krafchick to come up with the word lean, which I think actually has done a little bit of disservice to what it is we're trying to do. But that's a different topic. So I have been just incredibly fortunate with the people I've been able to work with and the places I've been able to go. So I am truly grateful for the opportunities I've had.
That's fantastic to be able to actually practice lean, or work as it was known back then, in Japan, in the culture. But is that the key, though? Is the key the fact that it wasn't something special, it was just work?
Well, I think yes, a short answer, yes. It's just the way they do the work and kind of the environment that you're working in. As we look from the outside in and try and write it down, what is it they do? What is the magic? Well, it's hard work, and it's got a tremendous focus on people development, and that's typically that gets missed. When I first got over there, and like every Friday afternoon, I thought I was getting fired because HR was coming down and talking to my coworkers and my manager. And you hear the murmuring. I hadn't learned any Japanese yet, and all of a sudden, murmur, 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 Jim-san, murmur, 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 Jim-san, and then someone would look over at me. I'm thinking, crap, I'm getting sent home. And it was just that HR was down, making sure how was I assimilating to the group, how was I assimilating to the culture, how was I assimilating to Japan. Was this a horrible mistake, or how's he doing? And just that level of involvement and engagement, making sure that I'm okay as a new hire, was just totally alien as a concept.
Yeah.
Like, what HR group, is that hands-on, making sure that the kids are all right?
I guess when that happens, when you're made to feel cared for and you're made to feel important, it changes your ethic towards the work, doesn't it? You go that extra mile for people. You feel like, yeah, I'm valued.
You do, and you don't get assignments, back then. Now, look, this was 30 something years ago. So that they had 2 plants in America, they had 4 plants in Japan. So what it's like today, if there's a current employee listening, they might be shaking their head, because we're looking into this is when the world was in black and white. So this is when I was there, but it was good to be part of that team because we did stuff as a team. It wasn't, Mayuchi-san, you go do this, Kimura-san, you go do that, Mori-san, you go do that. It's like, okay, Camry design finished. Let's review drawings. We still had drawings back then. And I got a lot of learning assignments in the form of a question. So my trainer would say, oh, Jim-san, please explain some form of equipment that we were going to have to design and install in Kentucky in a couple of years. So I have no idea. He's like, well, please go find out, which was the go and see, right? So I was always getting these questions, which were, go learn about the system and come back and explain it to me, and take your notebook and draw it so you can show me all the different parts of it. And it was just a very immersive thing. But one of the funny things about the Japanese culture was the boss leaves first. So you're sitting there and the boss is working, and it's 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and you're tired, and you're just waiting because everybody it was open office. We were in the rows. Our supervisor crossed the T, and then the manager was further down. So everybody you could tell when the manager got up to go, because then the next level of the organization would grab their stuff, and then we could finally go.
That's amazing. So everyone's just sitting there waiting for the person to leave. Like, just leave.
No, they're all working. There was more work than there was people. My trainer would put in the year I got over there, he was on, I think, 3,400 hours.
Wow.
Because the government asked them to track and reduce the hours they were working. This was right after peak Japan, right? This is when people were throwing themselves out of windows because of work stress kind of stuff.
I just love the Japanese culture. I mean, I've been very fortunate, like yourself. I've worked a lot with folk from Japan to deploy lean in different companies. And I just always find them such a pleasure to work with, and that they're so logical, and it is, like you say, it's culture, it's natural. They're not thinking we must do this the lean way. They just do it, and it is the lean way.
Basically, yes. I mean, if that's all if you were to go into a different system, just like something what we would consider like a current state company that reaches out, they would go in there and just be shocked and wonder, how in the world did this organization ever get this way? But that kind of leads to one of the things that I tell companies that I work with, that puts them on their back foot a little bit is I say excellence is optional. You don't need to be great to be in business. So you really need to make that choice. Do you want to be a world-class athlete, or do you just want to shoot around on the weekend with your buddies? Because it's a choice, and with that choice comes consequences and massive investments in people and self-improvement and team building and all of that, because the process and the tools will come.
When I first started out, we had a Japanese sensei, and he used to come over sort of every 6 months, and he would like audit. So we had his literature, and he came from Toyota and Fiat and all these manufacturing companies. And he'd come over every 6 months, and we'd have an audit, and we would present the pillars. So we had like workplace organisation, logistics, people development, all the standard pillars. And I was the workplace organisation lead, and he had a bit of a fancy for workplace organisation, so he used to give me a little bit of extra time. And I used to find just spending 5 minutes with him over the lunch break and just talking to him about just really basic stuff like, what do you think about the way you've seen that we do this process? And there's little snippets, gifts I used to call them, the gifts he would give us. It just blow my mind, like the way he thinks. I just couldn't understand. I'd never come across people before, or a person before, that thinks in that way, and it opened a whole new world to me. So inspiring.
Yeah, no, that's great. And those are the fun things to do when you're working with organizations. When you can get that engagement, you can see the light behind the eyes and the clicking, because for this person, like all the people that I've worked with and with me, it's not like they or I were born with anything different. It's just what we've been exposed to, the system we've worked in, and what the habits, that we've created. Because, when you've seen one factory, you've only seen one factory. Everything out there is completely different. But I think when people come in with those higher first principles of, what problems are we trying to solve, then the solution set can be totally 100% customized for the people that, are trying to solve that problem. So I think Jeff is very good at this as well, and a lot of other consultants that I've worked with, is getting kind of behind the, don't tell me what you're doing, tell me the problems that you're trying to solve. Talk to me about your thinking. Talk to me about what you've tried, and then let's see what we can do, to help you along a little bit. Because there is this wonderful diamond encrusted gold plated toolbox with all those lean tools in it, but that's not the power. The power are those conversations that you had with your trainer, and to really impact the way you approach things. Because if you can look at things through a different set of eyes, or using a different framework, call it the lean framework, call it Bob, I don't care, call it what you want, then it doesn't matter what's in that toolbox, because you'll be reaching for something different than I will in a different situation. So it's always the thinking. To me, that's the job of the coach or the trainer, is to not be impressed by how many yellow lines you put down on the floor showing people where to put things, but rather talking about the problems that you're solving.
Makes such sense. Just talking to you, I can see the Japanese culture in you. You sound like my professor. You say the same things.
Oh, uh-oh.
It's good. It's a compliment. It's really good.
Well, thank you. Well, the nice thing is, it all does devolve kind of back to those first principles about what problem we're trying to solve. And I think when Leica wrote Lean Leadership with Gary Convis, kind of the second question that all leaders need to be asking is, who is the right person to solve this problem? So the organization needs help because we've got a gap, right? We've got a gap to a target or a gap to a standard. That's our problem. Now, how would the organization benefit from Matt solving it versus Jim solving it? Is that part of our long-term thinking around organizational development? What exposures does Matt need? Maybe Jim's the best at, this supplier replenishment thing. Maybe he's done it for 10 years. But Matt needs to do it. So even though it's a little bit longer road, it's a longer runway to get this problem solved, we're better in the long run because now Jim was able to coach Matt, and Matt was able to work through this, and we've been able to be successful.
So it goes back to that invest in the people.
It does. And, if you troll LinkedIn like I do, there's a lot of pushback against, it's not always leadership's fault if lean transformations fail, blah, blah. Yes, it is. I'm sorry, it is. Excellence is not something that's done by your frontline customer-facing people. This needs to be derivative from the vision of the corporation. It needs to percolate down through the organization, and that the leaders are training their teams, and then they are training their teams, etc. Now, this is not an integrative act. This is not something where, well, we've got 17 Kaizen teams spread across North America, and we've tasked them with doing 3 Kaizen events a month. Therefore, ipso facto ergo, at the end of the quarter, there's going to be money piling up, at headquarters.
That's such a common mistake, though. I mean, I've experienced that where, I sit down at the beginning of the year where I've been a lean leader of a team within an organization, and they've said to me, right, next year, how much are you going to save? I'm like, sorry? They go, how much money are you going to save? And I go, well, I don't know. Let's base it on Kaizen events rather than on money, and then we'll work at the money afterwards. No, we need to know how much you're going to save. We want 100 million from you.
Yeah, okay. Sure. Put me down for 105. I like to overachieve.
It's lack of knowledge, isn't it? They just don't understand, I think.
Yeah, and where you're tearing your hair out, jumping out of your skin, wanting to scream at them. No, set the targets for the business. Identify those gaps. That will help us determine direction and what we need to go work on. It needs to be derivative. It can't be integrative or integrative or... I hated calculus, so I'm sorry about that.
I wouldn't know the difference, so well done.
Oh, dear Lord.
Brilliant. So many of our listeners are at the moment in the current climate, they're looking at lean and going, right, we need to save money. We need to be more frugal in our organization. We want to create a culture. So this might be the very first time they've heard about lean, and the Toyota production system, TPS, is like the daddy of them all. What would be your advice for someone who's just starting out then?
Avoid subjective words like that word salad you just threw at me. Too much, not enough, more, less.
Yeah.
Boil it down into where are we? Where do we need to be objectively? What's the gap? Let's break it down and start working one by one to solve problems. And really what I've just kind of given you there is the engine behind the Toyota Kata that Mike Rother came out with about 15, 16 years ago. Jeff and Mike have been working exclusively to continue to develop Kata. So Jeff has kind of moved off of Toyota, etc., and he's really down into what we consider kind of that primal element of, continuous improvement, that Higgs boson, if you will, which is, set the target, set the direction, understand where you are, understand where you're going to go next, like your next step, not your giant leap across the English Channel to France, but just what are we going to do next? And then experiment, iterate, try. Find a coach, be a coach. I mean, it doesn't get, if people are looking to get started, don't look to go to a 3-week seminar hosted blackety blabbity bloobity blibbity. Just for God's sake, find a coach, be a coach, and start iterating intelligently, scientifically on solving these problems. The answer is not going to be in a book.
Great advice. Really good. I've got a stack of books. I think everyone does, don't they? Everyone who does lean's got a complete stack of books in the corner.
Yeah. And I say that, with a little tongue in cheek, and that whenever I do executive education, I always tell the managers and leaders in the executive corps, I said, stop reading. Books bad, fire bad. And they kind of look at me funny, and it's like, the answer's not in there. You're going to get some good context frameworks, some good war stories, from other organizations, how they've done it. But the challenge is not to increase your knowledge of the topic. The challenge is to increase your experience with it. So you can start on a continuum, I guess. So you'll have knowledge, that's your stack of books. You'll have some skills where you just start out trying things, your first few projects. And we all remember those, right? Our first few engagements.
Yeah.
Those were hilarious. But then over time, then you start building that experience, right? You've got those stories now. You've got that scar tissue, because nothing ever goes the way it's supposed to go. If you can get where you're trying to go without really trying or stumbling or falling or getting any scar tissue, you should have been there already. You're just lazy.
Yeah, I was told once, I think it's one of my trainers that said to me, failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. It's true, isn't it?
It is. It is.
It's true.
And as long as, if you're sticking with that, like the Kata framework, if you make a mistake, or if what comes out of that experiment isn't what you thought you were going to get, that's experience, and it's also never going to be fatal to the company, because your coach is going to make sure before you run that experiment that you're not, pushing the big red button to see what it does.
Yeah, it's true. You learn some of the best lessons through the things that don't quite go so well.
Yeah, and the best part of that learning isn't that you didn't get what you thought you were going to get. It's rather, how did you respond to that? What are you and the team going to do now? What did you learn? What are you going to try next? One of the things I always appreciated after I left the company, looking back in at some of the internal documents that they used, from a leadership perspective, the concept of what's next pervaded all of that literature in that, good job, but what's next? In the US, we like to celebrate. You got to have your back slapped and you got to have a team photo and you got to get Amazon gift cards or whatever. It's not necessarily the embodiment of what's next.
But that's a cultural piece again, isn't it? So in America, people like to celebrate, backslap. If someone wins the lottery in America, everyone's like, "Oh, well done, man! You really deserve it. I'm really pleased for you." In the UK, if you win the lottery, everyone goes, "Well, he didn't deserve it. He shouldn't have got it. It should have been me." It's
Well,
a
you
totally
can't win if
different
you don't
culture.
play.
Absolutely, you've got to be in it to win it. So the Toyota production system, then TPS. What does that framework look like? What actually is that?
Well, nothing was written down when I was there. So the Toyota Way didn't get first pen to paper until like the early 2000s. I think when Toyota realized at the size they were getting, just that tribal teaching, the tribal learning wasn't going to be effective. They were just getting too big too fast. So when you look at the TPS framework, it's been written up a lot of different ways. You've got the traditional house that's got the JIT and Jidoka pillars that you see for production operations. But if you go kind of above that to the corporate vision, the corporate approach, you just find the two pillars, right? You find challenge and then you find respect for people. And if you can really stay with those two concepts, then the rest of it will come. It's derivative. I've seen so many complex frameworks written up and drawn up by people. And really what they're trying to do is take an incredibly rich, context heavy culture and approach to one type of business, and they're trying to put it into a two-dimensional thing. And that's really hard because how do you, where do you put in there at 6 a.m. I'm standing next to my desk in Motomachi number 2 doing my exercises to that corny music that's playing through the speakers. What is that part of? How does that get mapped into one of these giant, cultural type things? And I wouldn't worry about it. I think we spend too much time worrying about the rituals and the idols and that kind of stuff. I mean, if you understand that we're on a road to excellence, and the only way we're going to get there is by instilling a sense of challenge into every employee we have and challenging them and stretching them while also showing the deepest respect for them as people. What else do you need? Everything else is going to come from that.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah. So, you see what you've been there, right? You've gone into organizations and you've seen the walls covered with stuff, banners, team photos, exhortations. But if you look at a high level, the business is still just kind of bumbling along. And it's because they've missed it. They've focused on tools. They've focused on Kaizens per time series. And what'd you do last week? Oh, we 5S the supply closet by the copier that doesn't work. Really? Fantastic. How did that help the organization reduce its late ships to the customer?
But so often, though, I go into plants and, I talk about 5S, and more often than not, people think 5S is just drawing yellow lines on the floor. They miss the key element.
Exactly. And it's basically 2 or 2.5S.
Yeah. But that goes back to the point you were making before about the leadership and the management of the company. They're clearly not doing the training properly to educate people on the value of doing a really good 5S exercise.
Yeah, and it's also their lack of understanding about what it's for, because what you just described is what we typically find in that, all of this transformational work is something else people have to do. It's not the method by which they're going to be successful this quarter, this year and the next 5. It's something else people have to do. And when push comes to shove, if you're not there on a daily basis, welded to the hip, they're just going to go to old habits.
Yeah, it doesn't sustain, does it? It just crumbles. I won't name the company, but I was in an organization once where they had a world-class manufacturing that they were badging this under. And they had a world-class manufacturing team. And these were all operational managers that were released from their day jobs. And they spent every single day working on world-class manufacturing in the background. Then they would roll it out onto the shop floor, ask everybody to participate in it, and then roll it away for another 6 months. And I think the point you made just then is so important. This isn't extra work. This isn't on top of your day job. This is how you should be doing your job. You do it this way. And that method that I just described just then didn't work, and it didn't stick because it was a tick box exercise. Are you ready to elevate your team's ways of working? Are you seeking fresh insights and growth opportunities? Our experts will assess your team's practices, providing valuable insights for improvement and celebration. Reward and recognise your team with this certification tailored specifically for creating an improvement culture. The BQF Academy accreditation acknowledges your journey, outstanding outcomes, and future plans. Whether you utilize Lean, Six Sigma, project management, or continuous improvement techniques, this certification celebrates your incredible work and positive impact. Propel your team's performance to new heights with the BQF Team Excellence Culture Certification. Visit www.bqf.org.uk today and let's celebrate your success together.
13-time Shingo-prize winner Dr. Jeffrey Leiker and Toyota Kata author Mike Rother have created the Improvement Kata and Coaching Kata online course. This inexpensive, compact program is designed to transform your thinking and approach, making you a highly skilled learner and coach. Engage in deliberate practice to turbocharge your progress. You also get lifetime access to the materials, including all of the bonus interviews. Why pay up to 10 times the price elsewhere, listening to some consultant, when you can gain direct insights from the masters themselves? Skip the rest and go with the best. Join us today and embark on your journey to excellence. Just click on the link below to start your journey.
For sure, and done by external people. And we actually wrote about that in the Toyota Way to Continuous Improvement. When you've got those internal people, if they're the ones doing the work and if they're the ones that you send off for, heaven forbid, certification in something, what they're doing is they're bringing their knowledge and experience and raising the performance level of that area. But they're not leaving any of themselves behind. They're just leaving. And then when they go away, you regress back to prior levels of performance. So entropy kicks in. And I think that's kind of one of the big things that bothers me is I always get these questions around, sustainability and how do you make this self-sustaining? And again, I turn people off. I say, it's not self-sustaining. It's absolutely, there's, I see these graphics and again, I troll people on LinkedIn. You see people pushing a boulder up a hill and they put a wedge underneath it and label that wedge standard. Like somehow standards are going to keep you from backsliding. And that's totally false. And it's a shame because people are getting false notions that, you can do something to someone or an area and it's going to stay like that. It's not. Higher levels of performance require higher levels of inputs, higher energy. We could sit here all day and swap stories about, different clients, but that first 80% of the improvement they're going to make is the easy stuff. That's the basic stuff that they should have been doing already. That last 20 on that journey to excellence, those problems require much higher skill sets, much more developed people, much more switched on organizations that work better cross-functionally. You can go in and clean up a shipping dock and find a bunch of stuff that you hadn't found and, have a nice $250,000 event. But when you start getting up into what is a method that we use to replenish to our customers and link with our supply, that's a big cross-functional, hairy type deal. You need some good people doing that, and it's not going to be a world-class manufacturing team seagulling in for 3 months and then never to be seen again. I mean, that's not sustainable.
It's like the SAS. They come in ropes through the windows. Smash in. Look, we're the world-class manufacturing team.
That's right. Everybody down. You drop that donut.
Get on the floor.
Nobody move.
So it's not a wham bam thank you man. Doing lean, however you badge it, doing lean isn't a wham bam thank you man solution that's going to deliver you results overnight. This is a long-term cultural change.
And if you get back to your earlier comments about working with your trainer, if you think back to the words they used, they were selective about them. When you're doing something in an experiment, you're putting in place a countermeasure. You're not putting in place a solution. And it sounds like we're just, playing with the English language, but a countermeasure is something that's effective in the current environment, with the current volume, with the current product mix, with the current customers, with the current supply base, with the current global environment. It's just a countermeasure. A solution implies, ta-da, we're done, team photo.
Yeah.
So you're not. It's not cyclical. It's not the PDCA.
I'm laughing because my phone is full of those team photo scenarios where that's happened in the past. Makes me laugh.
Yeah, for sure. Some of my favorites were in the semiconductor field where everybody is completely covered head to toe, and yet there's a team photo.
It's like put this T-shirt on that says TPS for the team photo.
Yeah. It's like, we're not sure who's in this photo, but they're all thumbs upping, so it must have been a good event.
Oh, it's so true. There's people listening now chuckling away thinking, yes, that's what we do. We had one of those yesterday.
Yeah, I got a team photo. And that's, I love the concept. of the team photo, but if it's just a artifact from an event that was a one-off, that's really what I'm poking fun of.
Yeah.
I love the team photos. I love taking them. If the team's big enough, and they have to do a panoramic, you start at the left side and they start to pan and you run around real fast and you're on both ends of the photo. Those are all fun.
Yeah, they are great. They're very hard to do, though.
So I do love the concept of it, as long as it's part of kind of this broader, it's like a weekly team photo. This is what we worked on last week. These are the experiments we ran, so you're not going to have enough wall space for all the team photos.
So in your role as Vice President of Global Operations, this sounds amazing. What does that entail then?
Pretty much everything.
Busy man.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I said, I've been really fortunate working with Jeff, and the years that I've been able to just listen to him and learn from him and just have the discussions, because he always starts from kind of a framework or a model, whereas it's very easy for me to get caught in the details and just hit the ground running 1,000 miles an hour. And it's been great just to have somebody slow down your thinking and relax. What is it we're trying? Shouldn't this person, and just a lot of good inquiry. And he's been great as a coach for me. So I've been very fortunate to have such a good coach and friend.
He sounds amazing.
He is. He really is.
On one of the other episodes of this podcast, we spoke about generational bias and how people's experiences in life can impact how they behave in later life. So, for example, somebody who was brought up in relative wealth, they will be less concerned about frugality and will be a lot more wasteful. Whereas somebody who was brought up where they've had to scrimp and save and struggle a little bit more. And the analogy that the guest gave us was loo roll. So if you've got a whole roll of toilet roll, will you use more of it than if there's only a little bit left?
I will use whatever amount is necessary for me to...
Whatever does the job.
Yes. And that's an interesting approach, but I think it's perfectly valid. But I think if you step up a level in the organization, regardless of your background or what if you're a millennial or a Zoomer or a cynical Gen Xer like me, or even a Boomer at the end of the career, the toilet paper roll, the usage doesn't really drive anything. How many rolls of toilet paper are we using per quarter? Is it a problem? Because it might be wasteful in somebody's opinion, but is it really a problem? How do we know it's a problem? We'd have to know how much we're supposed to be using. We have to know how much we're using. Is there a gap? And do we have to put in place? Because not every problem you've got bandwidth to solve. And that's why I argue with organizations about, what are you working on? Oh, we've got to get we've got 13 Kaizen teams, so that means we're going to have 39 Kaizen events, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but what are you working on? What's important? What's critical? Because you got more problems than you can solve. So what's your filter?
I bet when I asked you to come on this podcast, I bet you never thought you were going to be talking about your toilet roll usage.
Well, I think through the miracle of editing, you can make me sound a lot smarter about that question. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'll find a way of making that sound really, really logical.
Well, is it a single ply or a 2-ply, Matt? Because that has a direct impact.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. I'll have to add that to my question database.
Yeah, is it the kind you buy at Tesco, or is it the kind you get at the petrol Bowser?
It's also expensive now anyway.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
In the UK, when COVID got really bad, this is how crazy things are in the UK, right? When COVID really hit, people were going out and panic buying toilet roll. The shelves in all the supermarkets were completely empty of toilet roll. You couldn't get it anywhere. People had stocked up.
Yeah, same in the US. It was the same in the US with paper towels,
really,
toilet roll, because you had to join one of the big warehouse companies, so you could go in there and you had to know somebody, and they'd tell you when the trucks arrived. So you'd be waiting out front, for the doors to open. And, it's like one of those in the U.S. after Thanksgiving sales, where people come crashing down the doors and trample old ladies to get the $50 television sets. And, they're going after the 24-pack of Charmin.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's going through people's minds? The problem is, though, when I then go to the shop because I genuinely need to buy some toilet roll, I feel like, are people looking at me like I'm one of those people? But I actually need to buy it. I'm not bulk buying.
Well, it's that second cart you're pulling behind you that's full of it. It might be...
Yeah, I got my wife pulling that one.
Yeah. It's for the church. It's for the church, people. Relax. It's for the church.
Yeah, we're donating it. So what is it like then to really work at Toyota? I'm just so inspired by the I would love to visit Toyota. I'd love to see it. But what is it actually like?
It's work. They don't play any special music. It's like any other job. But I think part of the job, it's hard to see because you can go down to any of the factories that do the tours. Right, they'll put you on the tram, give you the headset, and drive you through the building at 30 kilometers per hour, quickly pointing things out as you're desperately trying to take in what you see. But really, from the inside doing the work, I just remember that there was a lot of, because I was younger, I was being trained. So my experience working within that system was the one being trained, not the trainer. But it seemed like the supervisors and up just had a lot more responsibility, because not only do you have to meet the needs of the business, you also have to meet the needs of the team. So you have to be developing people. It's not like, well, good luck, we're all counting on you. I hope HR hired, some hot shots and young guns, and she's awesome, and I don't have to worry about her. It's very, very interactive, where you are continually working with your bosses, who are your trainers. It's not like there's a separate cohort or cadre running around teaching people, oh, this is the way we do it here. Well, that's what your boss and your coworkers are doing. And that's really the nice thing about just those critical standards that they maintain. Because when we were, designing and building factories, every factory Toyota has on the planet is different, because they all came into service at different times in their lives. So as they introduce a new technology, it's only after they've beat it to death for a year in some ratty, daggy looking outbuilding in Monomachi that the technology's proven itself. So they're going to try it in one plant. So the next time this plant goes through body change, we're going to introduce this technology. So they don't race things, they don't chase the greatest, wonderful new technology that some vendor is going to sell them. They're very methodical. They take their time. They don't put anything on the critical path that shouldn't be there. And that's very different from most companies, because they think we'll succeed on technology. I was at another company and they were doing a competitive engine teardown where they all, here's the BMW engine, here's the Mercedes engine, here's the Chevrolet Corvette engine, oh my God, here's the Toyota Camry engine. What a little joke this guy is. It doesn't have any features on it. It doesn't have variable valve, dual overhead cam, timing, yakety blabbity doobity. But so what? Guess what? It runs forever. The only way you can kill it is to drain the oil out of it. So just their approach to a lot of things on the engineering side was very different than what I've encountered in other companies. Test to failure. Here's this thing, people showing up at the test rig at midnight with their tatami mat to load stuff up, to start testing it, and they just sleep there, until the loud bang said the thing broke. Then they can get up and do some analysis on it. So they've got a very different approach to, what needs to go into the vehicle. And it's, there have been dozens of books written about all their different processes, but working there, you did have a different focus. It was strongly about the team's got to be successful. We've got really stretched targets we're going to hit. And the only way we're going to hit them is if we work well together. There's no miracles. There's no, oh, thank God Mori-san, suddenly thought of something in the shower one morning. It's hard work. It's very methodical, but you do have these wonderful core things that are kind of a core framework that you're using to do the work. There was a lot of it.
How do they train people? Do they work on an isolated line that doesn't impact the customer to prove that they can do defect-free before they do it, or do they put straight in at the deep end? How does that work?
Straight into the deep end with the trainer. So my coach trainer, person that was responsible for me, he was there every single day. If I was not like at my desk working on, we were still manual drawing stuff back then. They did have computers. They just didn't have a lot of them. So most of what we did for our factory drawings, we did by hand. And he would send me out on my little learning excursions to please explain. I came back to him a couple times with something I was scratching my head and said, this makes no sense whatsoever. Because if this works the way I think it works and the way I've designed it, this has zero quality built into it. And he looked at it, he laughed, he said, where were you? And I told him where I was. He's like, oh my gosh, we haven't updated that since 1954. So back then quality was not such a good thing. And it was, he showed it to everybody and it was kind of a good chuckle. But it was very hands-on. In the interactions, it wasn't like he was teaching me to walk. The interactions would be brief, very concise, and the questions were always painful, because my answer was always no. So I just learned by doing, day in and day out. Rinse, repeat, again and again. And
amazing.
Again.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It's inspiring.
It was.
I'd love to see it. I really would love to see it. I was invited by my trainer to go to Fiat and have a look at how they were doing world-class manufacturing. At the time, I was a very junior leader in this company. And the CEO of the company turned around and went, no, he's not going. It's only the senior leaders that visit these plants. And I never got the chance to see it. And I'd love to have seen it. I really would have done.
Well, those are the worst people to send. I always tell people two things: don't read and don't benchmark. And I just get the strangest looks. And they say, why? Is it because you don't know what problem they solve? All you see is what they're doing. And a great example of that, I think, is the concept of the marketplace. Like when I worked at Toyota, marketplaces were everywhere, and they were masters and mistresses of marketplaces. But when your plant's only building a couple different models, that works. Marketplace, supply line side, anybody that works in a factory gets all that, workplace layout, minimize steps, blah, blah, blah. Well, then their engineering department came up with a body shop that could make a Corolla and a minivan and a Camry and a Tundra. They engineered their way into that flexibility where you could put mixed models, completely different families of products in a plant. Well, there's not enough room for marketplaces anymore. So they had to completely develop a set parts system, which is basically kitting. But if you benchmark one of their facilities and you say, oh, they've got marketplaces, we need marketplaces. No, marketplaces solved the problem that they had. You go there now, you won't find any. Well, wait a minute, now we need kits. No, you don't. You need to understand your problems and pick the right countermeasure. So benchmarking can be dangerous when people that only have a superficial understanding of what they're looking at come back excited with photos. That's why in the 80s, whenever the big three would go to Japan and tour and want copies of stuff, Toyota would happily hand them out because they knew that there was about zero chance that they understood how to use the tool, what it was for. So it was like, sure, here's a binder.
Have a go.
Yeah, let her rip. What can go wrong?
But it's true though. Benchmark. And you're right. We don't know what's gone on behind the scenes. We don't know what the problem was. So how can we benchmark it?
Yeah, we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg. And that's why earlier when I said just get started, find a problem, find a coach, be a coach, and start working on your problems. There's not really any magic there. You're going to develop some neat, innovative things as you're solving your own problems. And that's the fun part. I mean, it's a huge sense of satisfaction when you increase some type of level of performance. And it doesn't necessarily need to be on a shop floor. We were working with a lending institution, from mortgage application until clear to close, which is kind of the end of their process, was running some upwards of 70 days. And working with all those different groups, they didn't make a widget. They were processing data and information. And to see their level of satisfaction drop in this below 30 days. They went from industry laggard to industry leader, and it's very energizing for the team to solve problems. One of the things that Meyer talks about, I don't know, it's either in the Toyota Way Field Book or one of the ones he and Leiker wrote. He said he learned it's very disrespectful to not let people solve their own problem. Just that concept of you do the work, you're not smart enough. The SWAT team will come in, or your SAS, busting through the windows on ropes, grabbing all the donuts. That's not a good model, because at some deep fundamental level, it insults the people. You're not good enough. Great culture.
That's what you're saying effectively, isn't it? You're not good enough to solve this problem, so someone else is going to do it for you and then tell you how to do it.
Yeah, and if you're out on the shop floor, who's going to be able to tell you better if all of a sudden that thing's making a different sound? Is it the fast rope and SAS people, or is it the people that are out there every single day?
Right, Jim, should we have some fun?
Oh dear, this is.
Should we play the yes/no game? So this game basically, go on.
I will leave that up to you, because I can neither affirm nor negate.
So that would be good. So I'm going to fire you some quick fire questions over 60 seconds. And the aim is for you not to answer yes or no. And we'll see how far you can go.
Oh dear.
It's harder than it sounds. I lasted 15 seconds when I did it. I was really rubbish. Oh, terrible, goodness. I was.
Oh, so you've decided to perpetuate the pain and suffering on your hapless guest.
I need to find someone who's worse than me, so I don't feel as bad.
Oh, well, fantastic, you ghoul. Let's go.
Right, let's do this then. Right, I've got to find the buttons. It's all going on. It really is. Right, so there's going to be 60 seconds on the clock, please. Do not say yes or no, Jim. Is your name Jim?
That is correct.
Would you ever appear on a game show?
I would never appear on a game show.
Are you a Harry Potter fan?
I read all the Harry Potter books.
Do you like them?
Well, my daughter was into them, and they said they were all witchcraft, so I had to figure out what they were all about. They were fine.
Have you known any of your friends since childhood?
I have not known any of my current friends since childhood.
I'm the same. Start afresh, that's my motto. Have you ever lived in another country?
I have lived in multiple countries, yes.
Oh, you were so close to the end, Jim. You were right at the end.
How'd I do?
You lasted 53 seconds out of 60. That's just painful.
Oh, fantastic. No, I'm just sandbagging, so I got room for improvement.
There you go, yeah. Next time, I reckon you'll do more than 60. Easily. You did really well, though. I could see the cogs going behind your eyes as you're trying to think of the answers.
Well, also let me, in my defense, I'm only on my first coffee.
And it's very early where you are. What's the time where you are? It's got to be like not even 7 a.m. yet.
Right.
Wow, that's mad. Madness. I admire your dedication and I appreciate your time. Jim, before I let you go, tell us where people can get your wonderful book and what's next for you.
Well, right now, our website's toyotawayacademy.com, but that really just takes you to our online kata course. So we've had over 1,000 students run through it. It's a short 3-hour course. It's a little more expensive than a book you'd buy in the bookstore. But one of the things we love about that course is once you're done with it, you're ready to start. And we will just continue working with organizations, trying to instill within them a sense of challenge and respect for people.
I like it. A lovely motto. What's the name of your book so people can find it on Amazon and stuff like that?
Well, Jeff and I actually wrote two together. The one, The Toyota Way to Continuous Improvement. And then a few years back, we had a little bit of fun and wrote a book called Trenches, which is kind of it's not an academic approach. It's just kind of more of a soft industrial fiction type thing. I just invented a genre there. And we had some fun talking about an organization on their journey using kata and working toward the goal of continuous improvement and culture change.
I like the image on the front of that book as well. When I was doing the research for this show, I thought, is that the same Jim? I couldn't work out whether that was a book about war or whether it was a book to go with Team Toyota.
we had some fun because we tried to draw the parallels between what lean practitioners, I'll use that term, what lean practitioners face on a daily basis is basically that whistle blowing and them going over the top in the trenches. So if anybody's got any historical references, you know how that usually ended.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate your time today. It's been so good talking to you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So some key takeaways from today's discussion with Jim. It's a common theme. It's come up in many of our conversations with our wonderful guests. People development. Invest in your people. It is all about your people. Culture, culture, culture. There's no point having a team that parachutes in and does lean activity. It's got to be with your people. Jim made a really, really good point about how would you feel if you brought someone else in to solve your problem and then they told you how to continue with that after they've done it. You've got to own it. It's really disrespectful to the people. Allow them to own the solution, own the problem, get them involved. It's that development piece is massive. Set business targets. That's how it's done. Don't chase money. Set business targets. The money will come, but it's all about the business targets, creating that culture, getting it to cascade down. The leaders are the trainers. So the bosses and the managers train people and it moves down the levels like a cascading down, like water trickling down a waterfall. It's all about the journey and about the learning and the experience. It's okay to fail and it's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn and that's how we develop as individuals, and you will develop your culture. And the last one, I think, which is really interesting for me, is benchmarking can be dangerous. So although we do encourage benchmarking in general, in organisations we say benchmark them, they're doing really, really well, or benchmark that unit because they're smashing this metric. You don't know what the problem was that they were trying to solve. So although you might have the solution, it might not work for you and it might not be appropriate for you because you don't know what problem they were trying to solve. So you need to understand the full context before you do benchmarking. Don't just try and land grab the numbers that you like. Super interesting. That brings us to an end of this episode of the Ever So Lean podcast. Thanks so much to Jim for joining us today and letting us peer through the window into the incredible Toyota Way Academy and hear his wonderful experiences. The work that you've done and continue to do is remarkable, and I really do thank you for giving up so much of your valuable time for us today, especially so early in the morning. If you like the sound of today's show and would like to hear more, please subscribe and follow the Ever So Lean podcast at eversolean.com. We will also find episodes that you might have missed, so check them out. Also, if you're on the socials, search for the Ever So Lean podcast, give us a follow and let me know about your lean efforts because I would love to hear them. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next episode. And don't forget, Ever So Lean, you know it makes sense. The Ever So Lean podcast is researched, produced and recorded by Matt Sims. Visit eversolean.com to find out more.